Is up, everybody? Welcome to another Team Total Tuesday here on Brewed Bets, presented by Pale Horse Coffee, a spot on the Sports Shift Media platform of podcast. I'm your host, Sports with BJ, otherwise known as BJ, and as always, I'm joined with another man with a couple initials, JT. JT, how we doing tonight, man?
Doing good. Getting closer to football season. About to tackle another Team Total Tuesday, but I can't lie. I'm not really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned something about myself while preparing for this episode, and that is I find the Big Ten extremely boring.
Mm-hmm.
You and I were talking about this a little bit last night. You know, even Ohio State, for all the prowess and all of the lore, if you will, that comes with that squad and that program, not a whole lot really jumps out at you and goes, "Oh yeah, Ohio State." They're there. They're the cream of the crop when it comes to the Big Ten, and that's about it. The rest of it's kind of lackluster.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people say it about the Big 12 with Oklahoma about how they just dominate that conference, but I think Ohio State even more so has dominated this conference for so long that you kind of just. I mean, Ohio State's going to win the conference most likely, and we're just going to kind of sleep our way through the season. There's a lot of teams that play slow, boring football. I mean, it's exciting to some if you like watching run, punt, but it's not for us.
Yeah, definitely as someone who's in the Big 12, that would be JT, his West Virginia Mountaineers, a little bit of a higher octane style of football there. In the ACC, we've got a lot of fun and gun teams as well. Not a lot of hard-nosed football, but hey, that's what you're going to get in the Big Ten. That's what they're built around. That's what they recruit for. And to each their own. Not our cup of tea, but it is what it is. We're still going to give them their due diligence. So here we are, week 4 of Team Total Tuesday. We started with the cream of the crop, the SEC. Then we went to the ACC. Then last week we knocked out the Big 12. So we're going to tackle the Big 10, which leaves one conference left, and we're going to get to them next week. And everyone probably knows already who that is. So we'll get on with it. So we're going to do the same thing we do every single week here on Team Total Tuesday. We're going to start with the team in the conference that's projected with the most win totals. And we're going to go all the way down through the bottom. And again, what we're looking at here is the Vegas line and what we think a proper bet should be based on what Vegas thinks the win total line is. There's no pushes. It's over or under is the pick. And we're going to start right off the gates with a team we've already mentioned, Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Quick little shout out to Kirk Herbstreit. Just released a book today called Out of the Pocket. I've heard it's phenomenal. It's on my buy list. So just a quick little shout out to a Buckeye faithful there, alumni Kirk Herbstreit. But we got 11. So here we go again. Every team, it was Alabama in the SEC. It was Oklahoma in the Big 12. It was Clemson in the ACC. We see a team come in at 11 with their number, which means if you take the over, they've got to go undefeated in the regular season. They got to go 12-0. Nothing else wins that bet. There has not been a team yet that we hear on Brewed Bets. We've had a guest that's taken an over for an undefeated team, but I don't think JT and I have picked an undefeated team of the top 3 conferences that we've already gone over. And I want to be interested to see if that trend stays the same. So JT, Ohio State, over under 11. What say you?
So, I mean, the problem with it being an 11, I think the most likely outcome here is a push. But if you're telling me to look at that Big Ten schedule where they Ohio State avoids Wisconsin, that's probably the best team that's going to try to compete with them this year in the Big Ten. And they get Penn State at home, I don't see much else on this schedule. I could see one loss, but if you're going to ask me between 0 losses and 2 losses, I don't see that second loss coming at anywhere on the schedule. The big out-of-conference game is against Oregon, second week of the season. I believe that line is somewhere around 10. Those lines are already out, and I already have money on Ohio State minus that 10. So I think they win that game easily. I think possibly the second toughest game of the season is that very first one at Minnesota. Minnesota's a tough place to play. They've got a good quarterback, good coach in PJ Fleck. So that could be an upset spot. But outside of that in Penn State, I don't see much else in the schedule. So I'm actually going over.
All right, so you're going to go 12-0, take the over on that. Which, look, I mean, I think you're right. 11 is the number here for them. It's kind of hard to believe that Ohio State won't get a bump somewhere. Could it be that Oregon game? Possibly. Could it be the Penn State game? Possibly. But after you look at it, like you said, no Wisconsin on the schedule. That's a dodged bullet. We know what the storyline coming out of camp is going to be. Justin Fields is gone. You've got a three-way quarterback battle between C.J. Stroud, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord. Not a bad situation to have, so I don't think it's going to hinder them. And look, the great thing about having a three-way, a two-way, a four-way, however many way quarterback battle you want to have is that means you have that many viable candidates to step in if things aren't going the way you want. Right? How many times have we seen teams go into the season and they still aren't clear? So you're going to play the first quarter, you're going to play the second quarter, and we're going to see what happens, right? We got a fan interaction already. Penn State or the Ohio State will win the conference. That's a very popular pick. I'd be very cautious of counting out Wisconsin. We'll get to them in a little bit. But like JT said, with the out-of-conference schedule only being Oregon, because they also have Tulsa and Akron, dodging Wisconsin, getting Penn State at home, I think we're going to have a clean sweep here for the first time of an undefeated. I'm also taking over on the Ohio State. It's not going to matter come playoff time, but they'll have a great regular season like they always do. They'll beat Michigan like they always do. They'll beat Michigan State like they always do. And it'll be another great year in Columbus. It'll be another great year in the closed horseshoe, which I will never not call it the horseshoe. I'm sorry that they closed it in, but I'm going over as well. So 12-0 picks here on Brewed Bets, Team Total Tuesday. What do you got, JT?
What I'm interested to see is how that defense does. They got torched a little bit in the passing game for most of the year. They switched to the 4-2-5 to try to get a linebacker off the field because most of the season they were just rotating in a third linebacker that couldn't keep up in coverage. So going to that 4-2-5 could make a big difference. But I still think they're kind of missing the guys on that back end to really compete at a high level. But you don't have many teams in this conference that are going to air the ball out. So it shouldn't be a problem until you come playoff time. Can they take down one of the big dogs?
Yeah. So 2 overs here for Ohio State. We'll slide down now. We'll go to the to the Big Ten West, talking a little bit of Wisconsin. The Badgers out there in Madison, right? Madison, Wisconsin.
Yep.
So look, this is a very interesting team. We just talked about the benefit of a schedule for Ohio State. I think you have the opposite effect here. Wisconsin has a really favorable schedule. Their first true road game does not come until October 9th, JT, and that's at Illinois. Up until, I mean, really, if you look at their schedule, their toughest road trip will probably be their last one when they have to go to Minnesota. They get to host Michigan. They get to host Penn State. And that's all in the first half of the season when those two teams will probably be figuring out what it is they're doing. Not a bad time. I'd rather have Penn State and Michigan in the first half of my schedule than have them at the back half of my schedule when everyone's clicking on all cylinders, if that's going to happen. The over-under is 9.5 here. I'm going to go over as well and say that this is going to be your Big Ten championship game. I like Ohio State versus Wisconsin. I would probably right now favor the Badgers, to be completely honest with you, just with the continuity of the team. You got a lot coming back for them. You got a lot of good things to roll off of. Last year was weird, COVID injuries, all that kind of stuff. And we could say that about every team, but Wisconsin was hit a little different than some of the other squads in the Big Ten. But yeah, I'm going over 9.5 for the Badgers. What say you?
We're in agreement again. I think that this team could compete for a playoff spot. I like Graham Mertz at quarterback. I know there was a lot of stuff coming out about him early on in the season about how he was going to change this offense. He was going to be able to throw it around a little bit. And then he gets COVID early on in the season, and he wasn't really the same quarterback. And then the rest of their team gets hit. They were one of the toughest teams hit with COVID around all of football. But then in the Big Ten, restrictions were especially tough. And if you look at this roster, how it's constructed, I think it compares. I mean, these athletes are better than what I'm going to about to say, but Northwestern last year had a bunch of 4th and 5th year guys that they just rallied all together, one last shot at it, and they ended up making the Big Ten championship game. This offense alone has 9 redshirt seniors. As a whole team, they have 6 guys that are 6-year guys. They were redshirt seniors last year, and they took that extra year to get the 6th. So they've got guys that have some of the most experience in the country. And I think with Graham Mertz at quarterback and Clemson Tranchez Malusi at running back, I think that offense is going to be able to power them to a lot of victories, and the defense is always going to be good. So over 9.5, I think is pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Lots to unpack there, but all of it really points to the fact that Wisconsin will be the second best team in the Big Ten this year, just in my humble opinion. So now we'll move on to a team who you could argue would be the second, maybe even the best team in that conference this year, and that would be the Penn State Nittany Lions up there in College Station, right? I can't Is it College Station?
Wait, what? Oh,
yeah, College Station.
It's Happy Valley. It's
Happy Valley. I think it's College Station is the name of the little town there. Either way, we're talking Penn State and Nittany Lions. This is very interesting for a lot of reasons, but I want to hear what you have to say first. Talk to me about the line being 9 wins over or under for Penn State.
First of all, it was University Park. I couldn't. I was drawing a blank on that, but this Penn State team, I'm not a huge fan of them, and it's really at the main position. It's Sean Clifford. Do you believe in Sean Clifford as a quarterback? And then even above him, do you believe in James Franklin as a coach? And the answer to both those questions for me is no. Sean Clifford turned the ball over far too often last year. He had a defense that is decent, but they couldn't really stop the run. Last year, they bring in a pass rusher, the Arnold Ebiketie. How do you think that's pronounced?
Your guess is as good as mine, brother.
But that's from Temple. He comes in and he'll get after the quarterback, but I don't know what they're going to be in the run game. They've got a few guys in the back end. They're going to stop the pass. So I really think it comes down to what's that front seven going to do against the run. And then on offense, I said it, Sean Clifford. That's just what it comes down to. 9 wins. I'm going to go under because I just don't believe in him. Plain as that.
Okay, fair enough. So you're talking about what it comes down to. For me, it actually comes down to one game. And it's probably not the game that everyone's thinking. It's going to come down to the Auburn game for me. All right. So they open up at Wisconsin. Then they have 5 of the next 6 at home. But one of those games is Auburn in week 3, right? They have an October 30th road test at Ohio State. So I'm going to go ahead and say, based on everything that we've talked about, we're going to assume Ohio State beats them. We're going to assume that Wisconsin's going to beat them. Both of those are road games for the Nittany Lions. So now you're sitting at 10. If they win out, they're at 10-0. So it really comes down to what you think is going to happen in that Auburn game. If you think Auburn has a chance in Happy Valley, then you might want to go with the under, because that could be their 9th loss, and who knows where else they might slip up. If you think Auburn is just outmatched in this particular game, then you can probably take the over safely. I went on record here, and when we did Team Total Tuesday in the SEC, I think Auburn is very overlooked this year. I think Auburn has done a great job keying up some big holes. And speaking of holes, there is a lot there in that Nittany Lions defense, right? We talked about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually going to take under here because I do think Auburn could go into Happy Valley and get a win there. And to show you, I think a good tell will be how they play it, right? So if they make it an 8:00 game and it's a whiteout, then that lets me know that Penn State is just as nervous about Auburn as I am.
Yeah.
If it's a 3:30 game, that tells me that they're, And it might be silly, but it's just how I view the ratings, right? You want every advantage possible. There's a difference between a home game at Penn State and a home 8:00 whiteout at Penn State. It's just different. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going under 9 for the Nittany Lions, which takes us to the Hawkeyes, the Iowa Hawkeyes. So the number for the Iowa Hawkeyes here, I just lost my place.
8.5
is 8.5. 8.5. So look, the non-conference games, you've got one you really got to worry about. That's going to be Iowa State, and it's at Iowa State. They only have 5 road games, with 2 of them being Maryland and Nebraska, right? But again, one of them is at Ohio State. They're going to be tested again early against Indiana. They get Penn State at home. I look at this schedule. I look at the offense returning just 5 starters, looking to find a new set of receivers. Smith Marset and Brandon Smith both left. Petra showed some good things, and maybe he can take the next step. But there's a lot going on here with Iowa that needs to be worked on, and really not even worked on, just filled and replaced. And in college football, very hard to do the very next year. Give me 2-3 more seasons. I like Iowa to be right back in the thick of the Big Ten. This year, 8.5. I'm going under with Iowa on 8.5. I like 8 wins for them. That's not a bad season. I mean, hey, my Cavaliers would take 8 wins, right?
Yeah.
But I just don't think there's enough there. There's more question marks than confidence marks for me. So I'm going under 8.5 for Iowa.
I'm right there with you. I think that's four in a row agreeing.
Yes.
But I actually think Spencer Petras might be part of the problem there. I think that he needs to take that step forward, and that could propel them above 8 wins. But he had problems with accuracy last year, and they don't have a whole lot of weapons on the outside that are going to get super open for him. So he's going to have to throw into some tight windows, and accuracy and touch was where he really struggled. Kirk Ferentz, he's a great coach. He's always going to have them there. So 7-8 wins, that's a really good season. But you're right that to get to that next step where you're 9-10 wins, that they just don't have the type of guys on their roster right now to beat a team like Iowa State, Penn State, who they have Wisconsin on the schedule. I think those are 3 almost automatic losses. And then do you guys have enough to get over the hump against some of these middle of the road teams? There's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that are right there bunched in the middle. So I think they lose a couple more. And I think you're right. 8-4 is probably the most likely outcome. And that's still a good season, but not enough to get over.
All right, so under here on Team Total Tuesday, part of Brewed Bets presented by Pale Horse Coffee. If you haven't already, go over to the website, use promo code Brewed Bets. That is BREWEDBETS, Brewed Bets. It'll save you 10% on your online purchase for delivery or pickup. Promo code Brewed Bets at paledhorsecoffee.com. All right, so let's talk about a team whose number surprised me. And I'm actually really glad that you are going to go first on this one, because I don't understand the line for Indiana being at 8, which is the next team. I don't quite know where we're getting that number from. I like a 7 maybe I would have seen, but 8 seems high.
Which site were you looking at? Because this is a team that actually is all over the board, depending on which site you're looking at.
So CBS Sports, and that's the only one. You caught me. That's the only one I went to. Okay. They had me at 8.
Yeah, because I've seen it at 8 and I've seen it at 7.5, which I think makes a little more sense. 7.5 and 7 is really the number that I've been coming up with of where it should be. So
well, let's cut the difference. Let's go 7.5 for their over on Brewed Bets here. 7.5 for Indiana. Talk to me.
And I'm still going under, and this is why. So Michael Penix is back at quarterback, and they did some great things last year, but I think a lot of it had to do with luck. I think that defense, they got a lot of turnovers, some of them lucky. You had a Penn State win in overtime where he did not cross the goal line. That should have been a Penn State win. For anybody that doesn't remember, I think it was Penix reached out to the goal line and didn't look like he got to the end zone, but they counted it anyway, got the 36-35 win. The defensive line struggled to get after the quarterback last year, so they were really just sitting back, and somehow quarterbacks threw it right to them. I don't think you see that same thing. They can't recreate that 2 years in a row. And then you look at the schedule. You have Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State. Those teams are all going to be improved, teams that they beat last year. They still have to play Ohio State. They open up at Iowa, tough game. And then out of conference, they also have to play the Cincinnati Bearcats, who are going to be a tough G5 team. So for that reason, I see way too many available options for losses. So I can't come up with 8 wins.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've got 2-1 out of conference. So they have Idaho, Cincinnati, and Western Kentucky. I've got them beating the Hilltoppers. I got them beating the Cowboys. I've got them losing to the Bearcats. Cincinnati's really, really good. A group of 5 team that should make some national news this year, even if it's just breaking the top 25, maybe into the top 18. I think Cincinnati's going to open some eyes. But you've also got Indiana with 3 of their first 5 games on the road, including an opener with Iowa, right? They got to open with Iowa. And I just see them getting through the first 5 games 2-3. Yep. I see that as a possibility, right? They do get Ohio State at home. We mentioned that, but they have Michigan which, listen, we don't know what to expect from Michigan. We'll get into that dumpster fire here in a little bit. But again, at 7.5, even at 8, especially for the value, I mean, it's like a buck 52, a buck 63, depending on where you go. That's just too much for me. It's plus 120 if you go over, but it's sitting at plus 120 for a reason, because it's very unlikely they're going to get there. So I'm with you. We've got another unanimous decision here. We're going under with Indiana at 7.5. Speaking of 7.5, and speaking of what we were just talking about, Michigan, the Wolverines, and their newly extended, for whatever reason, Coach Harbaugh over there in Ann Arbor. A lot going on. Pretty decent non-conference schedule. I'm very interested in their game with Washington. But outside of Washington, they get Western Michigan, shocker. Northern Illinois, makes sense. There's a chance they start 4-0 because they're 4 straight at home to start. But then when they get into conference, they have to go to Wisconsin, to Michigan State, to Penn State. And when it comes to Michigan State and Ohio State, Jim Harbaugh is not doing too well since he's been in Ann Arbor. I mean, Michigan State does not really own anybody, and you could make a case that Michigan State has Michigan's number ever since Harbaugh's got there. There's a lot going on. You do get a quarterback battle. Cade McNamara, J.J. McCarthy, Texas Tech transfer Alan Bowman. I don't know if I trust any of those. I've got him at 7 or 8 wins. They need to start showing a lot more consistency for me before I jump on any over they take. I'm rolling with Vegas here, and I'm going to say I like the number of 7.5. I see, again, 8, maybe 7. Oh, JT, I don't know, man. It's hard.
So one thing that I'll try to sway you a little bit. I'll give you my pick and tell you a little bit of the reasons why. I'm going over. I agree that the number is almost perfect. I'm not like running to the table to bet this, but I see it ending at 8-4 because I still think losses are at Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State. But outside of that, there's not much else on the schedule that really scares me. At Michigan State obviously could be. That Washington game could be. But I don't think they slip up at both of those. And they breeze through the rest of this schedule against Indiana, Maryland, Northwestern, who I think is going to be down this year, at Nebraska, home against Rutgers. The big thing for me is that along with re-signing that big contract, he went out and got a whole new staff. The thing about Harbaugh is that people grow tired of him. The demanding culture that he has around that program, it gets a little old. So I think a lot of the assistants may have got into that that kind of mindset of they're just like showing up to work, really weren't excited to like do their job and try to help these young kids grow. So you bring in a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator that's also switching back to a 3-4. I think that could bring new life to this program and could help them propel them not to a 9-win season, but just to an 8-win season and get back on track to try to do bigger things in a few years here.
Okay. I'm looking at some of my notes here, and I'm sorry, as I was talking during my portion, I got lost because I was looking for one thing on Michigan that I had. I was like, oh, yeah, that's going to be good. From what I remember watching of Michigan, and really not last year, but every year that Harbaugh's been there, the one thing that you can say, they're going to bring it defensively. The issue has been their anemic offense. I mean, the quarterbacks he has chosen have just been head-scratching at best, right?
Joe Milton was a problem last year. Him being gone helps them tremendously.
Absolutely. But you just go back through Shea Patterson. We could go on and on and on about the dudes that Harbaugh has fallen in love with. And to be completely honest with you, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that in the time he's been there, the best quarterback on that squad has been Jim Harbaugh. Like it's not a far stretch, but I did say defense. They're returning 9 of their 11 starters on a defense that, if I recall, was pretty good last year. They just spent way too much time on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to go under here just for the sake of not being unanimous through the first 6 picks. But that defense thing for me, I think, can get them in a situation where they could get over that 7.5. So I'll go over here as well. And before I talk myself back out of it, let's move over to I love this next team. I love them. I love them. I love them. Not only do they have one of my favorite basketball courts in all of basketball, but I'm in love with this football team. And we're talking about the Minnesota Golden Gophers. You're bringing back Tanner Morgan, who did have mediocre numbers last year. He only had 7 passes to 5 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. He's not going to have Rashad Bateman, but Chris Altman-Bell is back. And I think that he was overshadowed a lot by Bateman. That you could tell that there was a connection between Morgan and Bateman, and almost to a fault. But it's going to be the run game that carries them, especially early with a fantastic offensive line they've got, blocking for Muhammad Ibrahim. I don't know how to say that name either, but
Ibrahim.
The defense was disappointing and returns a lot of the same players. So we'll see if they can improve there. We talk about this every week. How positive is it to return a lot of starters on a side of the ball that was not very effective? It can go one of 2 ways.
Mm-hmm.
It can get worse. It can get better. Rarely does it stay the same. I love Minnesota. I love their schedule. They're out of conference. They got Miami, Ohio, Colorado, and Bowling Green. Give me 3-0 right there. I'm looking here at the schedule. They got a home match early with Ohio State. Could send a message. They get Iowa and Indiana back to back on the road in November. They do get Wisconsin at Minnesota. So they're going to have to get it early. But I am going over on the Golden Gophers at 7. I can't put a finger on what it is, but there's something in my analysis juju that is saying over. I'm going over 7 wins for the Golden Gophers.
You kind of stole my thunder. I thought I was going to be the one that was going to be in love with Minnesota. I am also going over, and I've got a little stat for you. I know Tanner Morgan struggled a little bit last year, but going back to 2019 when we had our last normal season, there were only 3 quarterbacks in all of college football that were more efficient than Tanner Morgan when throwing the football. Do you think you can name those 3?
In 2019?
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields.
He was 4th. There was 3. There were 3 of them.
Do I have those 2 right, though?
No. So Trevor Lawrence surprisingly was not.
Oh, wow. Then I have no idea.
So it was Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts. So So Tanner Morgan was ahead of guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, and Kyle Trask that are all in the NFL now, and two of those guys are big time names. So I think even without Rashad Bateman, I think Bell was, or not Bell. What'd you say the other receiver's name was?
For Michigan,
for Minnesota.
Bateman, Rashad Bateman, and Chris Altman-Bell.
Yes, Altman-Bell. I think he could end up being a guy that also gets drafted in the first round next year. I think he could propel himself to be one of those top level guys in this conference. And schedule wise, they avoid Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State. So those are three teams they don't have to worry about. I love this team to get to 8 or 9 wins. And Tanner Morgan bolts himself up, possibly not into the Heisman discussion, but at least into like a first round quarterback in the NFL discussion.
Well, this is going to be a first here on Team Total Tuesday. We have gone through half the conference now, and we have unanimous selections all the way across the board. There has not been.
Does that mean that we're just going to get all of those wrong?
Probably. I mean, if you follow Brewed Bets, you know that JT and I are either really, really hot or really, really cold. And it's not, I would say that's a bettor's life, but it's really not. We're kind of an anomaly in that it's really, really like white hot or a tundra cold. There's no in between with us. So either we're going to get all these wrong or the Big Ten's going to make us a lot of money this year. Let's talking about making some people a lot of money. Let's move on to the next. 6.5 is the number. And we're going to talk about Mike Greenberg's alma mater, the Northwestern Wildcats, the Fighting Purple. 6.5 is the number. What do you got for me, JT?
This is my probably boldest take of the season. I believe this is juiced to the over. I don't have that written down in front of me, but
it's juiced to the under.
Oh, it is juiced to the under?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's juiced. Yeah, it's minus $1.34.
Okay.
For the over.
Okay, then yeah, I'm taking the under. I think this is the most overrated team in all of college football. They're just outside the top 25. Their offense last year, the returners from last year's team, they have 28%. That's the TARP number. They return only 50% on defense. That team was filled with seniors and super seniors last year. They lose their defensive coordinator, Mike Hankwitz. That's the first time that they'll have somebody else calling plays back there.
Jim Hankwitz.
Jim Hankwitz, my bad.
Yeah.
But that'll be the first time he's not there since 2007. So the defense kind of leads things for them. Without Peyton Ramsey, I don't think their offense is anything special. Looking back to 2019, they were dead last in the conference in passing efficiency. They bring in Ryan Holinski from South Carolina. They have Clemson transfer Hunter Johnson as well. Can either of them recreate the Peyton Ramsey magic that we saw from last year? I say no. They have to be able to run the ball well, and I still don't think that's going to be enough, even if they do, because on the defensive side, not only do they lose their coach, they lost Greg Newsome, shutdown corner that's going to be playing on Sundays this year, along with 2 other defensive backs. So I think they're going to get torched a little bit. I think just overall, this is going to be a bad season for Northwestern. They take a step back, still have a good coach that can turn things around and get them back to a 7 or 8 win team here in a couple of years. But Northwestern's not a team that can just rebuild after losing everybody and go and win and get to another bowl game. So for that reason, I think they end up with, I don't even think they make a bowl game. So I think they end up 5-7 on the year and go under.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about Ryan Holinski coming from South Carolina, but he's already in a battle with Hunter Johnson. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. I do love their out of conference schedule. Indiana State, Duke, and Ohio. I love a neutral field matchup at Wrigley with Purdue. And that's really about it. I look at the schedule. I see 6 or 7 wins. So now I go to the line, right? Minus $1.34 if you take the over. plus $1.34 if you take the under. If I've got them at 6 and the number is 6.5, I'm taking the under.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the under.
There's certain metrics there. Smarter people than me could explain it, but the way that that's juiced at 134, you have to be like 65% confident that they're going to at least get to 7 wins. Mm-hmm. Like there's no reason to lay that juice if you're not super confident that they can get there. So if you're stuck around the 6 or 7 mark, it just makes more sense to bet the under.
Absolutely. And we're both on the same page in our line of thinking there. So now we've got a cluster, right? You've got a couple teams here with some interesting storylines. 2 of these teams are sitting at 6. One of these teams are sitting at 5, right? So the first one we're going to start with, and we're only doing this because it's alphabetical with them having a tie with the thing. So we're going to go Maryland Terrapins. That's my Charles Barkley for you. Over 6 is plus, well, it's actually even money. It's plus 100. Under 6 is $1.25. Wow. Rough game against West Virginia. They do have Howard for some reason and Kent State there. They get 4 of the first 5 at home here before a road trip to Ohio State. They also get Michigan and Penn State at home with manageable road trips late in the schedule. We saw what Talia Tagovailoa could do last year. It was exciting. It was good stuff. They got 8 starters from an offense that scored 80 points against Minnesota and Penn State last year, but only 38 combined in the other 3 contests there in the Big East, the Big Ten. So, God, dude, it's so hard with Maryland because they have it to be good, right? They have the ability to be an 8 or a 9 win team. They really, really do. 6 seems like the best number. 6 seems like the best number. And again, it's going to fall on the line. I got even money if I take the over. I got to give some juice to take the under. I don't see them losing 7 games, but I also don't see them winning 7 games. You know what? Just for the positive of the even money, I'm going to go over 6 with Maryland here.
Okay. So this is the first time that we will divert on our paths, and I will go with the under.
It only took 9 teams to get there.
Yeah. So this is the team that, in bold letters, the first thing I have written down was inconsistency. They showed up against a Minnesota team last year and threw the ball and ran the ball all over the field, put up 40-something points. But then they turned around. They played one of their worst games of the season against Northwestern, then turned around and laid a bad egg against Rutgers. And Indiana, they completely forgot how to run the football. So there were extreme highs, extreme lows last year. But then I'm looking around, they're extremely I don't know what the correct word is, but there's just something about them that I don't like. They had the 5th most penalties in all of college football in 2020. Undisciplined. The undisciplined team, when things go bad, it goes downhill quickly. And then Talia, I like him, but he is the only one on this team that ran for a touchdown last year. They lose Jake Funk, and the running backs coming back, there's not a whole lot of things that you look at that you like. And then on the defensive end, I don't think they get enough turnovers. I think they're kind of you need a team to create turnovers if your offense isn't going to be extremely consistent and constantly put up points for you. That you need to create those extra possessions. And I don't think their defense is going to do that. So when I look down through the schedule, I have 7 losses when I look at West Virginia, Iowa, Ohio State, a tough road game at Minnesota, Penn State, Michigan State, and Michigan. So for that reason, I think 6 is the most likely outcome, but I think that getting to 7 losses is a lot easier than getting to 7 wins.
Yeah, well said. And we love disagreements. It's always fun when you can go back and look and say, you got it wrong, I got it right, and talk about it a little bit, right?
Yep.
And that seems like what's going to happen here for the first time with these two teams. So now let's talk about a team that hasn't really been relevant since the 90s. We're going to talk a little bit about the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And of course, I'm talking about that 98 team with the famous Eric Crouch, right? Some memorable games that offense gave us, and Eric Crouch's arm put on the television set. This one is sitting at 6. And I'm going under. And I really don't think I have to explain it. There's nothing there in Nebraska this year. There's nothing. I mean, they are returning nine starters on defense, but they were dreadful. Absolutely dreadful on the defensive side of the ball last year. Just out of the gate, they have to go to Illinois, which, look, I know that sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, so actually that game, that's a week 0 game in Ireland.
So, okay, so they got to go to freaking Dublin. Okay, so they got to go to Dublin, Ireland, or wherever it is they're going. Anything can happen with that. Look at all the stuff we see in the NFL when they play their London games, right? I mean, you never know what's going to happen. But then in this first month, they have to go to Oklahoma, to Michigan State. They have to play Nebraska, Ohio State, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I mean, I just listed off 7 losses right then and there in that one statement. I'm going under. I'm really intrigued, though, because the under is plus 110, which is weird.
So the one thing that I think is the reason why I'm still stuck, I was really hoping, I was waiting to hear what you had to say because I'm stuck. I think I'm at 6 wins right now when I look down through the schedule. I think it's a great total. The thing about it is this is year 3 of Scott Frost, I believe. Mm-hmm. He was supposed to be the savior to turn around Nebraska football. And I'm looking at their roster, their defense. This is going to be the best defense that Scott Frost has ever had, not only at Nebraska, but his prior coaching spots as well. They have a USC transfer and Marquis Stepp coming in at running back. And last year, they actually ranked 2nd in the conference in the run game, in yards per game. So he should help improve that. They have 8 starters back. But then you look at the quarterback position and it's Adrian Martinez, and you're like, do you believe in Adrian Martinez to sling the ball around? That's really, I hate to make one player completely change my pick because I was at the over, but then listening to you talk, looking at the schedule, I'm going to go under. I have to. I'm stuck at 6 wins, and I can't find a budging spot to move to the 7 spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough. Again, 9 starters on defense, but that team was dreadful on that side of the ball. And again, schedule. I'm not saying that Nebraska doesn't have talent, because that would be very wrong of me to say. Mm-hmm. What I'm asking you to do, and if you're listening at home or whenever it is you listen to this, I want you to think about the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and I want you to go down through their teams that they're playing and tell me who they're going to beat. Are they going to beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma in Norman? Absolutely not. Are they going to beat Michigan State at Michigan State? That might be the only big game question mark they have, but I don't think they get it done on the road. They're going to beat Michigan? They're going to beat Ohio State? They're going to beat Iowa? Are they going to beat Wisconsin? Like, who are they going to beat to get you over 6?
Yeah.
I think 6 is a number. I think it really is. And if I'm going to get plus money taking the under, I'll take my chances that it's going to end up being under, knowing that I just rifled off 6 to 7 losses right there.
Yep.
So, yeah, both going under for Nebraska. Let's talk about another interesting team that might be on the rise here when we talk about the Purdue Boilermakers. A lot of not inconsistency, but fairly well spread odds here. The line is 5. It's minus $1.25 for the over, even money for the under. They've got a tough non-conference schedule. Oregon State and Notre Dame on the road, right? They do play UConn, which don't sleep on UConn. All right, please. I know because we're only because we're talking about Purdue. Don't sleep on them. They can start fast with a couple of winnable games, but November features a lot of tough matchups, including Ohio State and Indiana. You've got Jack Plummer and Adrian O'Connell fighting it out at the quarterback spot. The number is 5. Gosh, 5 wins is a really good number. Well done, Vegas, because I think that 5 wins for Purdue would be a great season. I really, really do. I think that would, if you could get to 5, heaven forbid you get to 6 and make a bowl, riots in the streets, because I don't see where it's going to come this year. So again, unfortunately, when we get to the bottom half of one of these conferences, I'm looking at the bottom dwellers and I'm going under 5 for Purdue.
So I'm actually going over with this, and I think that it's, if it was at 5.5, I'm probably going under, because I think that 5, again, Vegas, very good job. A lot of these Big Ten teams, they went with even numbers and they came up with great numbers. But I think they go 2-1 in that out of conference schedule. So I think they beat Oregon State, and I think they beat UConn. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, I think they beat Illinois at home. I think getting Minnesota at home, I know we say we love Minnesota, but I think that this Purdue team can actually go up against Minnesota and kind of compete with them, because they had the number 1 passing attack in the whole Big Ten last year. That's something that, going up against some of these teams, it favors Purdue, that they have a puncher's shot at this if they're going to just sling the ball all over the field. I know Rondale Moore is gone, but I think David Bell is the better receiver of the two. So you get him back, you get a couple other pieces back. Your offensive line is still going to be strong, like they were last year. I see them beating Oregon State, UConn, Illinois, possibly Minnesota, and then Nebraska and Northwestern, possibly Indiana. That's 7 games there that I think they get 6 of to get the over.
Okay.
But it does worry me that they have not come out and named a quarterback yet. They are kind of going with the 2 quarterback system for now, at least to start the season. But if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. So they need to figure that out by the Notre Dame game. I'll give you the Oregon State and the UConn game to figure it out, but you have to have a starter in place before you go to Notre Dame.
Yeah, starter in place or not, they're not winning in South Bend. That game.
Well, but I'm saying that if you cement a starter there, they can learn a lot in that game for the rest of the season. I think that you go through some growing pains there and kind of learn and can beat some teams later on in the schedule because of what you go through there. So we'll give Brandon a second to get situated again.
They're having some production studio issues. My dog said, "You don't need light in your studio at all." So she just knocked my ring light into oblivion. But we're back. And yeah, there's a lot there. The one thing I will say that makes me feel confident in my pick, and it's not a slight at JT in any way, when you're talking about teams and wins that they need to get, and you're using words like possibly, maybe, could, I'm not super confident. That's a toss-up game to me. And if I have to pick a toss-up game for Purdue, for what I've seen and what they have, I'm going to lean towards them being on the negative side of the toss-up. Mm-hmm. But again, it's college football. Anything can happen. We could be sitting here right now, and come November, Purdue could be 2 wins away from representing the Big Ten East, West, and we would be fools. So I don't know. We got an under, we got an over for Purdue. So let's slide up to the great state of Michigan and talk about the other team up there, the Mean Green, the Spartans. I'm not even going to touch this one until I hear you talk, because you've said some stuff in the past teams that have made me question really who I am. So talk to me about Michigan State, JT.
So this one I'm kind of shocked on. This one is one of my more confident picks of the conference. The total's at 4.5. I'm going over, And I think this is putting too much stock into what we saw last year. 2020 was a weird year for everyone. It's the first year of Mel Tucker as a coach. And I believe D'Antonio, he left the program in March. So they got a head coach. They got Mel Tucker in there, I believe, in April or May. So you only had a few months of a weird offseason where we didn't even know if we were going to play or not to get his team ready to play. They looked terrible at times, but then they still went and beat Michigan and they beat Northwestern. So they showed some promise there late in the season. I think they can easily get back to maybe not the Michigan State of old that is an 8-win team that consistently battles for the top of the Big Ten. But if you're telling me that they don't even have to make it to a bowl game to hit this over, they just have to get 5 wins. And I see 5 wins possibly in their first 7 weeks of the season. So I won't even get into the players yet. I'll listen to what you have to say. But just based off of what I'm looking at on the schedule, I see over pretty easily.
Yeah, so I'll take the players because there's an interesting quarterback battle here between Temple transfer Anthony Russo and Peyton Thorne. And it's going to be someone who knows the system and someone who's going to be able to whoever can move the ball better. And I know that sounds like such a stock statement to me. Obviously, whoever knows the system and can move the ball, but it's different with these two, right? Because they're so evenly talented. I don't think you have really a better quarterback. You just have a better scenario with each quarterback. And so that's why I say that it's going to come down to who shows they know the system better and who may be able to move the ball better, because there's really a deadlock between them. Last year, the offensive line was brutal, but you've got 4 coming back with a full offseason. People forget the Big Ten was the first conference to come out and say, we're shutting everything down. They did not get an offseason. They just went into it, which of course the Big Ten was fine with because Ohio State was going to run shop through that conference anyway. So they were guaranteed their playoff team, right? But now you're going to give those same guys who were very young. 4 of those starters are very young coming back. They get a full offseason. You could say the same thing about the defense. It was horrific, but the talent is there. Shakur Brown had 5 interceptions last year. He's going to be missed, but you've got 4 Power 5 transfers coming back into the secondary. I see 4 wins out the gate, honestly. I mean, you look at it, they got Youngstown State and Western Kentucky for their out of conference. Let's make that a win. You get winnable home games against Maryland and Nebraska. Now we're at 4. So all you got to do is get me 1 more win, and I win.
Yeah, you've got games at Northwestern and at Rutgers, which I'm down on both of those teams, and that's within the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the easiest bet of the entire college football season. I'm going over. I'm taking Michigan State over 4.5. I think Michigan State could get to a bowl this year.
Oh, definitely. I could see as high as 7 wins with this team. They're still going to lose Penn State, Ohio State, so there's still losses on the schedule. But this one, I'm not sure what Vegas was thinking. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, I think maybe they're thinking people aren't paying attention to the deep Big Ten teams because I mean, look, man, that is, whew, that seems like easy money. But again, Vegas is Vegas, and the house always wins eventually, right? So let's talk. You just mentioned it. We're down on Rutgers, and we were talking about another team you were down on. But Rutgers is next at 4, right? 2 of their last 6 games are on the road. One of them is at Wisconsin. But you look at their non-con. Temple, at Syracuse, and Delaware. I know Rutgers is not great, but neither are those two.
Don't sleep on Temple.
I'm not sleeping on Temple.
I already have a bet in that Temple plus 17.5 in that game, and I have a little bit of money on the money line as well, just because Temple brings back a lot.
So I'm going to rag on you a little bit. You can't say don't sleep on Temple because I have them in a bet getting 17 points. You can't say that, but I get what you're saying. Look, I actually think they can lose that game. So I'm looking at 2 wins. I think they beat Syracuse. Look, I'm an ACC guy. When we got to the Syracuse portion of Team Total Tuesdays here on Brewed Bets, and we were talking ACC, we didn't even want to touch it. They're projected to finish last in the ACC. Their win total was, 3.5, right? Something like that. And I think we all took the under on 3.5 with Syracuse. So give me the Syracuse win. I don't care that it's in the Carrier Dome. Give me Delaware as a win. I know Delaware is a good FCS team, but I like them. So now you're saying I got to get 2 more wins, right? 2 more wins.
That's the tough part.
I can't. I can see in all the cards fall in the right places scenario, Rutgers getting 4. I cannot in any realm of possibility justify them getting more than that, even if they have a stellar year. When you look through the roster, which I know we might talk about a little bit, but it's Rutgers. Who grows up and goes, I'm playing football for Rutgers. I want to be a Scarlet Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, right? So, I think this is an easy under. I do, but it is intriguing for sure.
Yeah, and the big thing is for them, we haven't talked about Rutgers in a while. Greg Schiano had them at 5 wins last season, but the 2 biggest things that they were top 10 in the country in were turnover luck, and they had some special teams, a lot of special teams touchdowns. So those are 2 things that year to year, they don't translate. Like you can't carry that sort of stuff over. So they win those 5 games, but I don't see them being able to recreate that. Noah Vedral, the quarterback, turns it over a bunch. And despite winning those 5 games, they were 105th in offensive SP plus and 84th in defensive SP plus. So they were pretty bad on both sides of the ball, but just got lucky in a few ways. Greg Schiano, he'll do some good things at Rutgers. They're not going to be a team that goes winless every year in the conference. But when I look at it this year, I see Illinois being the only possible Big Ten win for them. Even if they go 3-0 in the out of conference, that still puts them at 4. So for that reason, I'm going under.
Okay. So we'll slide over to the last team here in the Big Ten, which is really the Big 14. We're going to talk about the Fighting Illini. The Fighting Illini sitting here at 3.5, right? Pretty favorable non-conference schedule. They got Texas San Antonio at home. They got Charlotte at home. They do have to travel to Charlottesville to take on my Cavaliers, which is going to be an L. So give them 2 losses, give them 2 wins in non-con. A friendly start to the year with 5 of the first 7 in Champaign. They get Wisconsin at home. They get Minnesota and Iowa on the road. They hired Brett Bielema. And look, that's a relatively unsurprising hire, right? Like we know Brett Bielema can recruit the area. He was a no-brainer to replace Lovie Smith. A lot of the top skill position guys this year are gone, so it's going to be tested right out the gate. Oh man, I see 2 wins out of conference. I need them to get 2 wins in the conference. You know what? I'm going to take over here. I'm going to take over 3.5 for the Illini, and I hate that because it's so much juice at $1.52, and the under 3.5 is sitting there at plus 120. But if you told me 3.5, is it more? Which I mean, I'm about to really define the entire show. But 3.5, is it more likely that Illinois gets over that number or under that number? From what I saw last year, I do. I like over. I like over 3.5 for Illinois.
Because, I mean, what it really comes down to, you're asking Brett Bielema, who's a good coach, who's won at both programs that he was at before he jumped to the NFL, to get 2 wins out of the games that I'm looking at: Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers, Northwestern. That is 4 games that are very winnable games, and he only needs to get 2 of them to hit the over. I think Brandon Peters, with new offensive coordinator Tony Peterson, I think he's going to take a step in the right direction. And then you have you have a few running backs, Chase Brown, Mike Epstein, who was a nice change of pace back last year, went for over 5 yards per carry. And then Brown, he had 100-yard games against Rutgers and Nebraska last year. So he was the big factor in those 2 games. And those are 2 teams that I said they possibly could, they have games against that they could possibly win. So if he goes off again, then I see this over hitting pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't think it's really hard there. I think that and the Michigan State pick are 2 of the easiest ones in this conference on whether or not you're going to go over and under. We had Michigan State at 4.5, Illinois at 3.5. And look, in the blink of an eye, which is really about an hour long blink, we are done with Team Total Tuesday for the Big Ten. Keep an eye out on all of our social media. We will post our graphics kind of highlighting the simplicity of what we did today. You can chime along with us at all of our social media outlets, Sport Shift Media on Twitter, Facebook. We got Brewed Bets on Twitter. Make sure you give that a follow. Sports with BJ, always ready to talk. We want to get more interaction with you guys. It's not fun sitting up here just talking. We want to have people's opinions. I appreciate Dennis Mitchell chiming in, thinking that Penn State or Ohio State is going to win the conference. I don't know if that's really an outlier pick or anything like that, but it's, hey, always appreciate the interaction. JT, any closing remarks?
No, just get all of your bets in. We've got, I think, 11 days now until week 0. So bet responsibly, and we'll be back here again next week for one more of these Team Total Tuesdays.
That's right. Before you know it, for those watching at home, that window behind JT will be covered in snow, and that will be a great time of year. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, Pale Horse Coffee, veteran-owned, veteran-operated, serving their country not only in war and in safety, but also in coffee. Brewed Bets is the promo code, 10% off. For JT, I'm Sports with BJ. We'll see y'all next week.